Aloha! Welcome to my beautiful lanai here from Glen Burnie, not from beautiful Hawaii, since we are still in quarantine. But I'm going to take you on an imaginary visit to Hawaii today. So, aloha! As you can see, we're introducing what has become Hawaii's most famous musical instrument. Although this instrument that most people call the ukulele in Hawaii is really known as the ukulele. And out of all the instruments you see around me today, it's the most modern instrument used in Hawaii because it didn't originate in Hawaii. It was actually brought to Hawaii in 1879 by a Portuguese sailor. Originally, it was just a small version of a guitar. And when the Portuguese sailor brought it to Hawaii and demonstrated it to the Hawaiians, they were fascinated. In fact, he played it very, very fast. He didn't just drum it like me. I don't play string instruments very well, as you can tell. But he played it very, very fast, and his fingers moved so fast that they called it the jumping flea, which in Hawaiian is pronounced ukulele. And that's where the name of the instrument comes from. So this instrument has only been known in Hawaii for about 140 years. But for more than 1,000 years, most of the instruments around me have been used by Hawaiians and by Polynesian islanders for a very, very long time in all of their traditional Hawaiian music. So I want to demonstrate and show you part of my collection today. One of the early forms of Hawaiian instruments was one that they found in nature, the conch shell, a very large instrument made from a shell, an animal that lives in the ocean. Some of you may have gone to different island countries and brought home a conch shell. They're very beautiful. When they're polished up inside, a lot of people put them on shelves in their homes, and they're very pretty. But people in island countries have used them as instruments for a very long time. In fact, they were used more like modern-day trumpets to signal the beginnings of battles, to warn people in their countries, and they're played much like modern-day brass instruments. They would cut the end of the shell off, and because of all the spirals inside, when you buzz your lips into it, it makes a very loud sound. Now when you do this from the top of the mountain on an island and the sound echoes all over the water, it oftentimes can be heard throughout the entire island. So it would be used as a warning sound by islanders to let them know that maybe people from an approaching island were coming to attack them. And so they would know ahead of time that they should be ready for a battle. The conch shell is still used today in many different ceremonies in island nations in many parts of the Polynesian countries. But in Hawaii, if you ever visit, it will always signal the opening of a luau or Hawaiian ceremony. There are many different kinds of Hawaiian instruments. This we would consider an early form of a brass instrument. What most people don't realize is that the Hawaiians also have an early form of woodwind instrument. But it's not a woodwind instrument played like we would think today. It is a type of a flute. Now, most early forms of flutes are hollow wooden sticks. This is actually a bamboo tube with holes punched in it, just like many modern-day flutes. Now, normally, a flute like this in other primitive forms would be played like this or like this. The Hawaiians, however, have a different way of doing this. Let me see if I can get this situated correctly, because they do not play the flute with their mouth. No. I have to situate it just right. odd about this is we don't play this flute with our mouth. It's actually played with your nose. You close one nostril and you blow out of your nose into the flute. It's called a Hawaiian nose flute. Not an instrument to be played for someone with allergies, for certain. Luckily, it's a good day for me. A Hawaiian nose flute. Check that one out. Only country I know that doesn't play a flute with your mouth. So the Hawaiians also have a lot of different kinds of percussion instruments, rhythm instruments that come in many different forms. So, let me take a look at a few of these. So, it's interesting, when some people look at this instrument to begin with, it kind of looks like the flute. Only, if you blow into it, it doesn't make any sound but wind. The reason for that is, it's actually what I guess we would term a rhythm stick. It's made from bamboo just like the flute, but when they cut the bamboo, while it's still green and soft, they slice all of these ridges into it. And then when it dries out, those ridges become very firm sticks. And in a luau or a hula dance, they take two rhythm sticks together and they hit them. These are called puili. Puili, Hawaiian rhythm sticks, played to help keep the beat. What's interesting is they're not played by percussionists during the hula dance. They're actually played by the dancers themselves. Now, I'm certain you don't want to see me dancing a hula, but perhaps during our music class today, I'll show you a video of some other people playing these as well. The puili rhythm sticks. Oh, let's see what else we've got here. Famous type of tree that grows in Hawaii is a palm tree. Different types of palm trees. Coconut palms. Don't want to stand under a coconut palm when they're ripe because the coconuts will fall directly on top of your head. Not a good thing. Perhaps you've seen Gilligan's Island. Don't want to get conked by a coconut. However, coconuts can also be used as musical instruments. If you cut the shell open and perhaps drink the coconut milk, you can save the outside of the shell and allow it to harden. Sometimes coconuts, the shells themselves, are used as rhythm instruments. You hold them in your hands. If you're a fan of Monty Python, it can be used to make the sounds of a galloping horse. Coconut shells. What else do we have in my collection of Hawaiian instruments? This is a modern day instrument, but it actually was used by the Hawaiians as well. They would make it out of a large palm tree as a rim, and they would cover it actually not with plastic or vinyl like this, but they would cover it with the only kind of leather that they had in Hawaii. Since they didn't have large mammals to make leather from, they would cover it with shark skin. Inside, they would fill it with small pebbles or perhaps tiny seashells. Then when they move it around, it would make the sound of the ocean. I happen to like this particular drum because it has images of beautiful coral reef tropical fish. I can almost imagine, even though I'm here in Glen Burnie, that I'm still sitting on the seashore, imagining that beautiful warm water and that tropical weather. My ocean drum. So some of my other favorite Hawaiian instruments I actually had the opportunity to see made while I was in Hawaii. After we'd attended a couple of luau's and I saw some of these beautiful instruments that they were using, I highly recommend, if you ever get there, to go to the Polynesian Cultural Center. Not only do they have a lot of different demonstrations of food that Polynesians have eaten for centuries and different costumes that they wear and dances and all that, but almost every kind of imaginable instrument that they've used on these islands for centuries. But after seeing those instruments, I just wanted to have them, which is why I have such an extensive collection here. So we went to a factory where they make them. And one of the most beautiful instruments that I saw demonstrated were these beautiful flowers. Well, actually, they're not flowers. They're made from feathers, but they're made to imitate Hawaiian flowers. What they actually are kind of like Hawaiian Maracas. The base of them are gourds, and they're tied with hundreds of large feathers. I saw the people in the factory tying all these things together, and I thought, what a beautiful process this is. They've been making these like this for hundreds and hundreds of years. And in each of the hula dances that you see in a luau, dancers use these as they dance. They make a shaking sound, just like a Spanish or Mexican maraca. Same kind of sound, but so much more beautiful to watch. Just one of the most beautiful instruments that I've ever run into in any country. These are called illi, U-L-I-U-L-I, illi. I guess that's maybe an exclamation of how beautiful they are. I wish I had flowers like this growing in my garden. I have a few flowers around me today, but certainly not as beautiful as this. And most of them haven't started blossoming yet. The illis, Hawaiian Maracas. And then, two more of my favorite Hawaiian instruments. When we went to Hawaii, one of my objectives was to purchase one of these. And after I saw it demonstrated at the Polynesian Cultural Center, I said, where do you get one of these? And they told me. So we actually went to the factory where they are still making these instruments today. It's actually made of two different gourds that are glued together and then varnished and braided so that you can hang on to it while you're playing it. What you do normally is you sit down on the grass. I don't have any grass on my deck, my lanai here, as they would call it in Hawaii. But you sit down on the ground, you hold the top in the hole that's been drilled into it, and you pound it on the ground. It makes a thumping sound. Usually during a luau or a Hawaiian dance, they would have maybe a dozen of these that are all pounding at the same time. So you get a very loud thumping bass sound. While they're thumping the bass sound, oftentimes they will also tap the top with the palm of their hand. So they have a couple different options for sounds on what is called an ipu heke. An ipu heke kind of looks like a little man. I feel like I should be a ventriloquist when I have it sitting on my lap, but I don't have that kind of skill, and I don't want to draw a face on this beautiful instrument that is still handmade to this very day, grown by nature and played by Hawaiians in their traditional dances. I guess I could even do I feel like I should be singing "We Will Rock You" now. I don't think they do that in Hawaii. One of my most recent purchases of a Polynesian instrument, see if I can get my ipu heke to sit still here, is this beautiful piece of wood. This is a Tahitian log drum. Tahiti is another Polynesian island, and as is true with a lot of Polynesian islands, people traveled from one island to another. And Hawaii has a lot of different cultures that have come together. Samoans, Tahitians, people from Fiji that have all settled in Hawaii, and they brought their own cultures together. Kind of like America, it's a melting pot. Hawaii is a melting pot of Polynesian cultures. So the Tahitian log drum, which is called a toere, is a hollow log. You can see that there's a slit in it. Some people call it a slit drum. The slit drum allows it to create an echoing column inside. This is one that I had made for me special, and you can see that there's beautiful cutouts on here, and in addition to the cedar that it's made from, there are patches of ironwood, which is a very hard type of wood, and the ironwood is hit with ironwood sticks. When it's played, you hear this sound oftentimes in a hula. I just think it's a beautiful piece of art, and certainly it is. All handmade, a beautiful log, varnished, painted and stained, but a true piece of Polynesian culture. Kind of play it like a snare drum if you want, with bouncing sticks. But a very echoey, loud sound. Again, many times you see several of these in a Hawaiian luau when they are doing their traditional Hawaiian dances. So I brought to you many different Hawaiian instruments today. Oftentimes they're all played together at the same time. In traditional Hawaiian music, we certainly wouldn't see what we think of as the Hawaiian instrument. A modern day instrument introduced only 140 years ago, but all the rest of these would have been played for centuries throughout all of Polynesia, but especially on the islands that we call Hawaii. Thank you for visiting us, and as they say in the islands, not only hello, but also goodbye, aloha.